All right, well, in order to keep this train moving, we're going to get started, and this will be the last session of the morning, and then we'll break for lunch, and then we'll come back. And I hope you kind of see the way in which we've structured this is the morning has to do more with, our philosophy of how we do evangelism, how we have the conversations. You'll see especially that last session and this session, the nature of truth being preeminent, right? If we're not in agreement on the kinds of conversation we're going to have, objective truth, then there's no really point in having the conversation with somebody. And so that's really important. And then what we'll look at this afternoon is, okay, what are the main apologetics arguments that we try to focus on if we're talking to somebody who is who's not a Christian? Because there's lots of we'll talk about this more this afternoon, but there's lots of areas that we can disagree. In fact, even in this room where we disagree, but in these essentials, there's agreement, and that's what kind of puts us in, as we say, the house of Christianity. But then in the house, there's lots of different rooms, right? So we can be in the basement, or you can be in like the top floor, but we're still in the house. And so the question is, what are the views that bring us in the house, and what takes us outside of the house? And so we'll look at those major apologetic arguments this afternoon. Just as an aside, if you want information about our respective ministries, they're on the back table there in the atrium. Again, our ministry is called Ratio Christi. I'm a chapter director at Utah Valley University, and we raise our support. We're supported missionaries, so I'm full-time supported missionary. We raise our support just through monthly donors, individuals, mostly in churches that just support our ministry. If that interests you at all, you'd like to learn more about our ministry, maybe how you can support us, or any questions, there's some information back there. You also see Ratio Christi has about 30 ebooks that are available for free download. If you go to our website, ratiochristi.org /publications. And so I think I put 2 of them back there on the back that are just the printed versions, but you can go on and get any of these available for free download. Does God exist? Evidence for the resurrection. All kinds of stuff that are on there, classical apologetics argument, that's available for you, that you can download for free. You can check it out. And so there's 2 printed copies that are out there that if that interests you, and that the information is there. Our cards are there if you want to talk to us about our ministries. Maybe there's other churches where we could even go and do these, or to share about our ministry. Both of us are trying to get to full support to be able to do this. We're doing this full time, but to be at full support so that we can focus on the ministry aspect of it, not necessarily the fundraising aspect of it. So that's one of the reasons even that David is here this month, is to do some fundraising so that they can stay in the land, right? It's really important for them to be able to stay over there. In order to be able to stay over there, they've got to be funded. And so we certainly appreciate a church like this. And Dane, just thank you for letting us do this. And I think he would say churches that value the evangelism to the Jewish people, and we would say, both of us would say, but churches that value the life of the mind within Christendom, because there was a philosopher, Catholic guy, but he wrote a book called "The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind," and I think the scandal was that there is no evangelical mind, which is not good. We're not known as thinking people in the 21st century, and that's not good, right? Because historically, Christians were always the most those who were thinking the best about everything, because we honor God. One of my teachers, he said, God is not fond of intellectual slackers any more than he's fond of physical slackers, laziness. So we want to think well about the most important things. And so we appreciate a place that we can do that. And so we've even got some suggestions here. We'll go over places you can go for lunch afterwards, but we'll take a break for lunch. We'll come back and we'll work together again this afternoon. So tactics, obviously, we recommend everyone go. We would say every Christian should read that book, Tactics by Greg Koukl. He actually just came out with a new book just this week. It's called like Street Smarts or something like that, but it's kind of building on that. So we recommend that book, super important. But one of the things that will happen to you, it's happened to us, is if you're not careful, you learn all these tactics and you want to get in conversations, and then you get in conversations and they're still frustrating. And they're not going exactly where you want them to go, and it feels like you're missing each other. And so that's what we kind of want to take. It's almost like two parts of tactics in this that really will help you in your conversations to kind of know what kinds of questions I should ask, or where do I want to lead the conversation. And that's been, I'm thinking about the categories of where people are. So let's say, right, you are at your door. It's a Saturday morning, and a nice man in a white suit named Elder comes and knocks on your door. Like, how would you respond?
My name's Elder Egan. I'm from Pocatello, Idaho. I'm serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
My name is Elder Jensen. I'm from Bountiful, Utah. I am 20 years old, and I'm serving here in the Florida-Orlando mission. When we're at least 18 years old, we submit our papers saying that we'd like to serve a mission, and then it is chosen where we'll go. So I am here in Orlando, Florida for 2 years.
We get up in the morning, we eat breakfast, and we prepare for the day by showering and getting dressed. After that, we usually pray and read our scriptures for a few hours. The reason why we read our scriptures is so we can broaden our understanding of the Book of Mormon as well as the Bible. When we do this, we learn more about Jesus Christ.
So every day before we go out, we kneel down together and we say a prayer. We say a prayer so that we can be guided by the Spirit to know where we need to be that day, who we can help, and what things we can say. And as we do that, we feel that we're led to where we need to be. And I've been able to see how that direction has helped me on my mission.
And we go out and we talk with everyone that we meet. We contact people on the streets, knock doors. We also do service just to help people come to Christ and be able to improve their quality of their lives. And we usually do that all day until 9 o'clock. And then we come back into our homes and we finish up with planning for the next day, and then we go to sleep.
I knew my whole life that I would serve a mission. It was something that I was always looking forward to. I knew I couldn't just stay back home and not share the gospel that I've been blessed with in my life. I've seen the blessings in my own personal life and in the lives of others. And I knew that there was people prepared for me out here in Orlando, and I knew I needed to share it with them. And it's worth every sacrifice. And I know that people can, if they live these truths, that it can change their lives. And I've been able to see that time and time again in these people I've been able to help share the gospel with.
Because the gospel has blessed my life so much, I want to share that with everybody around me.
So you're at your door, or you're at your house, hanging out, and a knock on your door, and there's two young men, right, missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you're at your door, and you've studied some Christian apologetics, and you've studied a little bit about Mormonism, and we have different views of God, different Jesus, different God, different gospel, different scriptures, different view of truth. You know these things, and so you are going to tell them the truth because you care about truth, everything we talked about. And so you start giving them all your apologetic information, and you start telling them the truth about what they believe, and maybe you're asking them questions, and they're kind of responding, but they're also kind of pulling back, and then maybe it doesn't go that well, and then you're trying to press even further, and then you're just trying to share the gospel with them because now you're getting frustrated because it doesn't seem like it's going that well, and they're pulling back even further, and so you get even a little more aggressive, and then it ends up kind of walking away, and you're like, what was that about? And it's frustrating. It's hard when we bring students to Utah. The second day we're there, we go down to Temple Square. And Temple Square, if you've ever been to Utah, is where the famous temple. If you ever just if you're just Googling Mormonism or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, usually there'll be that temple that you'll see. That's heart of Salt Lake City, and that's Temple Square. And the Mormon Church has bought up all this land around there. Actually, this weekend is General Conference for the Latter-day Saints. So twice a year, in October, and first week in October, first weekend in April is General Conference, and so there's a conference center is there. It's like 40,000 people will be there live, and then all of the LDS will be watching it on TV, watching their prophets and their apostles speak to them. But we take students down to Temple Square. And only sister missionaries down there. And so that's intentional. They only have female missionaries, so 18, 19, 20-year-old girls down there who have had 2 weeks at the missionary training center of sort of, crash course on what it is to be a missionary, and then they're sent out and they're there. And then you have, people that want to come and argue with them, and or you have people that want to just come and just we want to share, and those conversations genuinely don't go that well. And when we first moved to Utah, we were just so frustrated. We're like, why aren't these conversations are just not going well? We know our tactics, we know how to have the conversation, we know the questions to ask, but the conversations just aren't going well. Why is that the case? And I was thinking about this when I was reading this book. This was a couple years ago. Malcolm Gladwell, he wrote a book called Talking to Strangers. I don't know if anybody read Malcolm Gladwell. I definitely don't agree with him on everything. Lots of things I don't agree with him, but an interesting writer. But he wrote this book, Talking to Strangers, and interesting book. But there was this one section where the details, I don't have all the details exactly right, but the purpose, you'll see for the purpose of what I'm trying to tell you, the story is important. There was this is the NSA, or one of the highest organizations within in DC, that were trained on how to spot spies. Okay, they were basically trained on how to determine if there are spies, and to find spies, and then to go and be spies. And these are the highest of the highest. And they found out intel that there was a spy within their organization. So again, this is the people that train people how to spies, and they're the best of the best. Found out there's information that someone in there is a spy, and they had to try to interview. They had to interview people, and so there were certain people that were interrogators that their job was to find out if people were lying to them, and that's what they've been trained to do. They were the best of the best, and they go around and they're interviewing all of the people in the organization. And there was this one lady, as he's telling the story, this guy's interviewing, and he interviews her and determines, she's not a spy, whatever. And I think it was like 5 years later, they found out that she had been the spy the whole time. She was a Cuban spy infiltrating into the highest levels of the American government. And so the guy is thinking, he's like, what? I'm trained to do this. How did I, am I just that blind? And he goes back and I guess they had videotaped the he goes back and he rewatches the interview. And now, with the information he has now, he's watching that interview, and she's giving him every single clue he's been trained to pick up on that she's a spy. I mean, literally, he's watching it now with the knowledge, and he said, I would have picked up on this in a second. Why do you think, though, that he didn't pick up on that in the midst of the actual interview? Because this was his friend. He had been to her house. He had dinner with her family. He had been to her kids' birthday parties. He had laughed with her. He had cried with her. His whole life, he could not fathom the fact that she was a Cuban spy. Now, why tell that story? Think about when I go up to somebody, especially in Utah, and I tell them that their entire belief system is false, that they believe in a false God, that they believe in a false Jesus, that they believe in a false gospel, that their view of Scripture. When I tell them that, it's as if I go to you and I tell you your mom is a Cuban spy. If I knocked on David's door and I said, "Hey, guess what? Your mom's a Cuban spy." He was like, "Well, I guess she's a Cuban spy. Let's turn her in." Like, just immediately? No, he's not going to listen. He's going to shut the door in my face. He's going to, his initial reaction is going to be standoffish, right? He's going to be defensive, Do you think that he would be objective in that sense? He's like, well, the evidence does seem to point to, no, this is the story shows that in the face of it, people are not objective because there's a subjective component to it.
Russian spy, maybe.
Yeah, Russian
Cuban.
spy. No. And your family's probably not the best example because you're like, no, that makes sense. that explains a lot more, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Would it happen in one conversation? Well, I guess just come in one day thinking next I'm like, my mom's a Cuban spy. No, it's a series of conversations. Do you think my attitude, my demeanor, as I'm sharing this with him, do you think that would matter? No, obviously we know the answer. Now, again, apply that with, for me, in my context, Latter-day Saints, maybe in your context, people of different religions, maybe atheists, in David's context, Jewish people. You're asking them to abandon their entire worldview and admit that they've been lied to. Like for the LDS, especially those that are Utah Mormons that trace their blood back to the pioneers who came over with Brigham Young. That's pioneer stock is a big thing in Utah. You're asking that their entire family history has been a lie. And and for us, on top of that, with the LDS, they think basically they believe everyone gets to at least 3 levels of heaven. And they're basically universalists. Now, the highest level get to the celestial kingdom, but everyone kind of goes to one of 3 levels: celestial, terrestrial, and telestial. And you're asking me so you're abandoning that and families forever, for what? And so the idea that I would just be objective, that it would just be a series of propositional truth claims is silly. And so what we figured out was when we were having this conversation especially with LDS missionaries, the conversations need to be very different than they do with maybe somebody who has read a bunch of information about the LDS church, recognizes there's huge problems with Joseph Smith, there's huge problems with their view of God, Jesus, whatever, and is ready to have that kind of conversation. Those are very different conversations, and we were trying to have this kind of conversation with this kind of person, and it was terrible. It goes bad. So there was two guys that they teach. They were with Navigators Ministry, or no, InterVarsity Ministry. Sorry, Don Everts and Doug Shaw, and they wrote a book called "I Once Was Lost: What Postmodern Skeptics Taught Us About Faith in Jesus." And they were college pastors. With InterVarsity is kind of a similar ministry that, like Ratio Christi on college campuses, and they came up with, they said, here are the 5 categories. The book's interesting in lots of ways, but it said, here are the 5 categories that we've kind of discovered that people moved from going from postmodern skeptic, kind of, your average college student, to believer in the biblical Jesus. And they said, so the first category was they moved from distrust to trust. They learned to trust a Christian. So the first category was just they had no Christian that they could trust. They've been taught by the media Christians are all just white xenophobic racists, and so they had no Christians in their life that they could even begin to have a conversation with. So the first step was just learning to trust a Christian. The second step was they moved from complacent to curious. In other words, they're around these Christians now, they become friends with them, and they became to be curious about Jesus. These Christians were always talking about Jesus, they're always talking about who Jesus was, and it seemed to impact their life. And so they were not just okay with being in a relationship with a Christian, now they were curious about, tell me more about this Jesus. Then the third level was they moved from being closed to change to being open to change their life. Now, they Shop in Everts said this was the hardest threshold to cross. Now, this would be the hardest threshold for anybody to cross on any topic, and we're going to talk about this, how this applies to all categories. We're having evangelistic conversations, political conversations, in-house theological conversations. This is the hardest category to move from. Are you open to change? Are you open to being wrong? And they had to find, so the person who ended up coming to Jesus had to reach a point where they've heard about Jesus, yeah, they were interested, kind of learning more about him, but they had to be open to the change and the fact that they were separated from God because of their sin, right? And they had to be open to change. And that's not actually changing, but just being open to change, they said was the hardest part. And then fourth, they moved from meandering to seeking, which means they were interested in this Jesus. They were open to change. They were kind of in periphery of Jesus, but then they began to really investigate the truth claims of Christianity. They began to be intentional about finding the truth. And then lastly, they moved into a saving relationship with Jesus, right? They repented and trusted Jesus. They put their faith and trust in Jesus, right? Now, this is, again, from their book, Shop and Evers. Now, why is this important? Because think about all of those different categories. And we just learned tactics, and we just learned. So the question, what we have to decide, we have to find out when we're talking to somebody is, where are they on this compendium? And we're going to talk about maybe some ways we think about this in other cases, but where are they? Because if someone is at level 1, where they don't have any Christians in their life they trust, they've never met a Christian. Most of the LDS that we meet, especially in Utah County, have never met an evangelical, unless they've been on a mission. If they've been on their mission, especially if they've been to the South, they've met evangelicals, and what do you think their take on evangelicals is? Not good. Because here's what we know about evangelicals: have shut the door in their face, they've told them they're going to hell, they've kicked them out of their house, they've shooed them off their porch. In fact, we were talking to a missionary one time. Much of our conversation with people who've been on missions is, tell me about your experience. Oh, it was terrible. And we was like, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you. Like, I'm sorry that happened, because these are people, these are human beings. And again, it goes back to what we said in the first session. We have to love people. So there was a guy that I met in Utah who had been on his mission in London, England, and he had gone, and they go, like you saw in the video, they go door to door, right? And they knock on doors, and actually, just as a side, you know who the best salesmen are in the world? Or most of them are LDS, because they've learned how to get over their fear of being told no. And so some of the best, especially door to door salesmen in the world, are LDS. In fact, most of the multi-level marketing companies are headquartered in Utah, because that's where the people that are just like, they're over their fear of man. But he said, so he goes door to door in London. He knocks on a Christian's door. The Christian basically lectures him, tells him he's going to hell, tells him to get right, with God, and shuts the door in his face. He knocks on another door. It's a Muslim guy. The Muslim invites him into his house, makes him lemonade, gives him some food, talks with him. Maybe doesn't even share doesn't talk about the difference. Just is his friend. And then he leaves. And he said to me, who do you think, if I ever doubted the truth claims of Joseph Smith, if I ever doubted the truth claims of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who do you think I'd be interested in talking to more? The guy who just yelled at me? Now, again, we talked about the nature of truth. You can be a jerk and say true things, but we also have to realize these are human beings. These are not just robots. We're not just brains on sticks, right? We're humans. And so how we talk to people is really important. And so if you learn all this information, especially from this afternoon, on the nature of God and, evidence for the resurrection, and then you go and you talk to a level 1 person and you just start just vomiting all over the conversation about all their apologetics arguments, it's probably not going to go well. It's probably not going to be successful. Why? Because they don't even trust a Christian, much less what you have to say. So you're saying true things, but they don't even think they can trust you. So we've got to get past level 1 for many people before we can even begin to go down the road of 2, 3, 4, and 5. And most of our conversations, the reason why they feel so, most of our evangelistic conversations, why they feel so bad, is because we're trying to have conversations with people that are at certain levels. We're trying to have people, like with level 1s, we're trying to have level 4, level 3, level 4 conversations with them. And you can't do that. So this is just an example, and we'll talk about, so if we think about this, and you don't have to memorize this, the chart. I mean, this is important, or this levels, because this is based on, decades of somewhat anecdotal research of being on the college campus and thinking about this. And so starting to think, okay, where is my friend that I'm talking to? Maybe they're at level 3. And so that doesn't mean I'm not going to press them necessarily on a lot of this apologetic stuff. I'm going to press them on truth maybe, and are you open to change? Are you willing to change? And does truth matter to you? But if they're at level 1, I'm not even pressing them necessarily on that. I'm just trying to love them and just be their friend and encourage them and help them, introduce them maybe to Jesus. And again, we always say we're trying to move them one step to the right. Now, obviously, God can do whatever, God could take them from level 1 to 5, of course God can do that. But we're just trying to move them one step. And if I think that way, then I'm trying to think, if I'm talking to a level 1 person, now how am I going to figure out what level they are? By asking questions. By asking them questions, try to figure out where they are. And then based on where they are, that tells me the kind of conversation I want to have with them. So one of my elders, pastors, at the church that I go to now, he's developed this for Mormons. Now, maybe for some of you, this doesn't matter. You never had any contact with Mormons, but I want you to see how you can take this same idea and we can adapt it to whatever context we have. And then David's, he's going to talk about how he's even adapted it within Jewish conversations. So think about this. So when we have a conversation, if I'm not, I'm talking to an LDS person, right? So here are the different levels that, from this matrix that we've developed that have been so helpful for us in our conversations. Level 1, now I want you to notice the different language that is used in each of these. And this is all, if you're not in the LDS Mormon context, a lot of this might seem like it doesn't make a lot of sense, but this is so important, the way, even the nuance of the language. So level 1, I'm a Mormon and you're an evangelical. Messed up. No.
Sorry.
Oh, this. Well, I can exit.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Just close that again. I don't want you to. No. All right, just leave it there.
Okay. Sorry. Just pretend there's words up there on the right.
Pretend on that happens.
Yeah. I'm a Mormon. You're an evangelical. Okay. Notice the language. I'm something. You're different. What you have is false, and what I have is the one true gospel. 95% of missionaries that you talk to will be level 1s. That's why you're not going. And most of the Mormons that the only people you ever have a chance to talk to, for most people, are the missionaries. And you just start going into what we'll show you down here, a level 4 conversation. That's why it doesn't go well. Because they're level 1s. I'm a Mormon, you're an evangelical. What you have is false. What I have is the true gospel. When they go to the missionary training center, they are taught. They are, number one, anything that you read that's that's against the church is called anti-Mormon propaganda. And I say this lovingly, but one of my friends who's a former LDS, he says, or what I learned later was called history books. But he said, it's just called anti-Mormon propaganda. So you're not allowed to read any of that stuff. In fact, when you're on a mission, you're not supposed to read anything except for your Book of Mormon and your Doctrines and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price, and maybe the Bible. But so you've been taught that some of these arguments that you're going to hear are from the devil. So we go in with our apologetics arguments, and what do they think? Oh, this is exactly what I was told was going to happen. The evil one wants to prevent me from doing the godly work that I'm trying to do, and you're actually teaching them true things, but in their mind, they're saying this is exactly what I was told was going to happen. Some guy was going to, someone's going to be yelling at me these apologetics arguments. So that's the missionary that usually the missionaries they talk to. Level 2, I'm a Mormon/Christian. Notice the change in language. You're an evangelical/Christian. We basically believe the same thing. We can learn from each other. We call these kumbaya Mormons now, and this is where most of the younger LDS are now. Hey, I'm a Christian. The current prophet Russell Nelson. He's really trying to emphasize we're Christians just like them. That's like their marketing message now. Hey, we're all just Christians. Now, when it started, Joseph Smith was adamantly they're not, right? That's the whole reason they started, because he supposedly prayed about it and was told by Heavenly Father and Jesus, don't join any of those denominations. They're actually of the devil. So hey, we're basically saying the same thing. Right? Number 3, I'm a Mormon/Christian. You're an evangelical/Christian. I like learning the Bible from you, and you teach the Bible. I want to learn from you. The Bible is one of their standard works, but they believe the Bible hasn't been translated correctly. That's part of their 8 articles of faith. But they would say, no, I like learning the Bible. You guys study the Bible. We've had LDS who come to our church. They're like, I just like the fact that you exegetically walk through Scripture. Dane was saying, y'all just walk through you're walking through the book of Genesis here. Like we were just, our church, we're just walking through the book of Hebrews. We're just walking through Scripture. I like that. I like doing Bible studies, so we'll do that together. 4th, I'm a Mormon and you're a Christian. I realize that we don't believe the same thing. Notice now they're back to the Mormon/Christian. They realize they're 2 different religions about everything that matters, and I want to learn more. Level 5, I'm a Mormon, you're a Christian. I realize the difference between the 2 faiths, but now I'm just counting the cost. there's a student that goes to our church. Her name's Grace, great name, who goes, she was a student at BYU. She's come to know the biblical gospel. She's given her life to Jesus. And as a result, she's been kicked out of BYU because you have to have an ecclesiastical endorsement to go to BYU. And if you're LDS and you go in with that ecclesiastical endorsement and you leave, you're supposed to be kicked out. So she was kicked out of BYU. She told her parents that she is no longer Mormon. She's now an evangelical Christian, and they've cut her off completely financially because they look at her as an apostate now. So we've had students who have gotten all the way to level 5. I've known students who have gotten all the way to level 5, have counted the cost, and have said it's not worth, and they've gone back to Mormonism. So we have to show them that Jesus is better. Jesus is better than their religion. That means we have to do a better job of community than we normally do, right? And then number 6, I'm a Christian. I'm saved by Jesus, right? So now think about. If we think about this category, maybe this is the Mormons. David will talk about maybe within Judaism. But what we typically try to do is we try to have level 4 conversations, which are apologetics level conversations. We're going to, if you come tomorrow to the church service, we'll just do a brief history, just a brief overview of Mormon theology, and you'll see very, very different. But we try to have those conversations with a missionary who's a level 1. All you're doing is reinforcing in their head exactly what they've been taught at the Missionary Training Center, that Satan is the author of lies. Now we know that that's actually, it's so heartbreaking because we know that's a lie. But you have to be aware of where the person is in order to know what kind of conversation is appropriate. So for us now, when we talk to missionaries, number 1, we're super kind. We are asking them about themselves. We're asking them, because we know that most of their experience, especially with evangelicals, has been terrible. And then we're just trying to ask them maybe those questions about truth. Hypothetically, if the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was not true, and someone could demonstrate that to you by whatever standard you require, would you walk away? If you determine that Joseph Smith was not a true prophet, would you walk? So we're just trying to get them to think about these things. Maybe we're having a question about, is spiritual experience a good way to determine reality? We're asking that kind of question. With our level 2 friends, we're saying they're kumbaya. Is it truly the same religion? And we can just point to the differences. Are we actually saying the same thing? Level 3, it's awesome. We can just do a Bible study with them. That's why we love the book of Galatians. The book of Galatians is a great book to go through with LDS friends. The book of Romans is great too. In fact, there's this is totally God's sovereignty. 2 LDS students at BYU who both on their own had come to the conclusion this summer that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was not the true church, and they were investigating biblical Christianity. They were reading the book of Romans independently of each other, were placed as roommates together. Both of them realized this and are now coming to our church. It's amazing, right? So the Bible can do that work, right? Number 4, this is where all your apologetics geeks, and this is we can just give them all the information that we want. 5, we want to show them Jesus is better and the community is better. And so you see, whenever I'm talking with them, I'm having to determine where they are by questions. So this is why the questions are so important. And then based on where I determine where they are, those are the kind of conversations I want to have. Same with the threshold here. I don't know, you've thought some about Jewish evangelism, and maybe what are some of the categories maybe that you've thought about?
I think first, when you enter a conversation, it is so incredibly easy to judge and think for yourself where a person is based upon what they look like. And time again, we have so many conversations with either someone we didn't want to have a conversation with because they didn't look the way we wanted them to look, or maybe they weren't as clean cut as we thought they should be, or whatever, and it ends up being a great conversation. Or particularly with LDS and religious Jewish people, they wear it on their clothing, literally, right? And so there are Orthodox Jews walking around that are level 4s, and you would never know. There are Hasidic Jews with big black hat, curlies on the side of their head, tassels on their garments that are 3s, and you would never know. Okay, you would just think that guy's like a 0.5. He's not even a 1 yet. You know what I mean? So you just don't know. So you have to get in these conversations to know. Again, you have to ask that person questions to determine where they are. Secondly, hostility doesn't also determine what level they're at, okay? You can have someone who is so nice and would talk to you for 5 hours and they are a 0.2. They're not even, one, they're a level 1, right? But they'll just keep talking to you, because they're super nice and they don't want to let maybe they need a friend, you know what I mean? So we just try to leave a stone in their shoe. And you might meet a level 3 or 4 person who is, thinking of walking out the door and they're so frustrated and upset because their family wants to come out and now they're really counting the costs and they are, maybe it's a little more hostile conversation. You just simply don't know. So I guess that's the first thing I like to say is look, you cannot determine where they are unless you have a conversation with them. Okay. In the Jewish community, the Cuban spy thing is so apparent because my dad does not cry about stuff. Okay. He's baby boomer. He's 75 years old, really rough childhood. Just not an overtly emotional person. So the times I have seen him cry have been, I would say, we're out evangelizing or together or whatever, we're doing ministry together. And it hits him on multiple occasions throughout the year that his entire family, as far as we know, is in hell. And for the Jewish people, the baggage that you have to understand that you have when you talk to them is that it's not just that your mom's a Cuban spy. Your mom is a Cuban spy in hell. Right. And so that is not to be taken lightly in these conversations, particularly with the Jewish community. And when you present them, it's not really that your mom is a Cuban spy, right? It's that this person, Yeshua, who is the king of Israel, and all they know that he is, first of all, in Hebrew, it's Yeshu, which means may his name be blotted out forever, is he is the individual that the Catholic Church, or the church in general, they just think of the church as all one thing, has persecuted the Jewish people for the past 2,000 years, Inquisition, Crusade, Holocaust, pogrom, over and over and over again. And so it's so incredibly foreign for them to even think about this concept. So it's a little bit different, but that first one is probably the biggest hurdle. I mean, 3 is also big, right? But the first category there, getting them to just trust you as someone who believes that Yeshua, that Jesus is the Messiah, is very, very difficult. It's many times. Now, if they're a secular Israeli or, not as big of a deal, but if they're an American Jew, if they're an Israeli Orthodox person, it can be very, very difficult. So it's all the same categories, but they're just different as you go along, because I would say the distrust continues even beyond, level 1 to level 2 to level 3, you know what I mean? And then counting the cost is every bit as traumatic in the Jewish community, because you're going to get, if you're Orthodox, you're going to get excommunicated. Your family probably won't talk to you. They might hold a funeral for you. My friend Robin Bruckenstein, her family sent her to not detox. It's kind of like a detox center.
Detox for religion.
Yeah, for religion. They just thought she went insane and she had joined a cult. So they sent her to Brooklyn for a year.
A treatment center?
Like a treatment center to de-brainwash you, and when she became a believer. So anyway, it's all the same categories, but depending on which people group you're talking to, it's gonna manifest itself in a slightly different way. But again, understanding, if I'm talking to a Jewish person and they don't have any believing friends, they don't even know what a Messianic Jew is, that's a conversation that we're going to have so they just even trust me as a human being. So again, it's the same stuff, but it just looks a little different.
Yeah. And how do we figure out where people are? By using the tactics and asking them questions. But the other beautiful thing about, again, we jokingly said, what if we could have on college campuses, the only thing we're not allowed to talk about politics and religion, and that's all we talk about in our club. So I remember last year we had a whiteboard. Question was, can we have a rational conversation on abortion? That was just our question. And it was funny because then someone took a picture of us and then posted it on the school Instagram account. Why are these white men trying to talk about abortion? Which actually proved our point. We can't even and meanwhile we're having good conversations with people and we're using our tactics. But so think about this: if you take truth and you take tactics and you take the categories and you put them together, this is not just in evangelism, right? This is for, we want people to know Jesus. We want people to know the biblical Jesus. And this is why this is so important. But think about the current situation our country is in politically. Do we have any conversation with anyone across political lines ever? No, we yell at each other, right? We shout at each other. So think about how you could take these categories and if you go on the college campus, some of the professors, they really do not know a conservative. Again, whatever political position you are right now, they don't even know a conservative, and they definitely don't trust a conservative. So just meeting somebody who is liberal and you're conservative, or you're liberal and they're conservative, and just being friends with them and actually having the conversation, right? Maybe then you're encouraging them to be curious about your political point of view. Like you're a thoughtful person and you believe this insane stuff. Like, I'm curious, how could someone so smart be so stupid in this one area? Like, oh, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you my reasons. And then being closed to change, to being open to change. So just as an example, in my life, I was adamantly pro-choice in my 20s. And I was presented with evidence. Actually, it was Greg Kokel's, a lot of his stuff, and then some really good pro-life apologetics. And I was convinced I was absolutely wrong. And I'm happy to share that information with you if you're interested. And so I've talked to thousands of people about that topic. There's been one person that in my entire life that in the middle of the conversation, they said, you know what, I think, adamantly pro-choice. We talked for about 2 hours. They go, you know what, I think you're right. And they said they're pro-life now. Like that never happens, right? So it happened one time. But the key thing is he was open to being wrong. He actually said at the beginning of the conversation, look, yeah, if I'm wrong and you can show me where I'm wrong, I'm happy, please. And so this means if you have some information, a little bit what you believe, and you can get someone to politically being open to being wrong. Now, most people in political conversations are not open to being wrong. We're probably just as guilty of that. So that's where we go back to the nature of truth. Because like David was saying, if I'm looking at these claims as independent of me personally, these are things that I'm examining and I'm trying to figure out which is true, and I want to hold on to the true ones, then I can be willing to look at my political opinions and examine them and hold on to the ones that are true, that survive that challenge on the evidence, right? And then maybe now I'm moving from meandering to seeking, and maybe I'm changing my political opinions on whatever it is. So think about how helpful this can be in those conversations. This afternoon, the last session, we're going to talk about a theological topic that is important to us, that's important to David. It happened to be at a church, probably where the pastor and David agree on that, but I guarantee if we started going through our theological repertoire, of views in this room, even though we're believers, that we would have disagreements. So how can we apply the categories to help us have better theological conversations? Some of the meanest, angriest, vile conversations I've ever seen are professing Christians on the internet who are arguing about their favorite pet theological position that's some secondary, tertiary issue. Angry. So how do we have? Well, we go back to the nature of truth. We ask more questions. The tactics. But maybe we're open. Are you open to being wrong? Are you open to having your theological position changed by what? By the evidence, not by by the anger about someone else, or not straw manning some other one's position. So I want to read. I want to read the best from whatever camp that I'm disagreeing with. I want to read their argument for why their position is true. So if you start going through these theological positions that you hold, have you read the best position from the other side? Probably not, right? But we just regurgitate bad arguments. There's a friend of ours, of mine, and there's a certain theologian that I like a lot of his stuff, and I think his stuff is really good. And just for whatever reason, he just won't even read his stuff, and he thinks he's wrong. And I'm like, you haven't even read his stuff and you think he's wrong. And he's like, yeah. And he points to some random thing he said one time. He's like, I disagree with that too. But that doesn't mean he's wrong on this. So that's what, you could be right on lots of things and wrong on other things. And so I have to have the courage to be open to do that. And then I have to I want to seek out testing my beliefs to determine if they're true. That means I want to read the best of the other side. And then if my position holds up, awesome. I'm better convinced of it. But if it doesn't hold up, awesome, because now I've come to believe something that's true. So these categories and the tactics are not just how do I talk to a Mormon, or how do I talk to my Jewish friend, or how do I talk to my atheist friend, or whatever. This is how do I talk to people? How do I talk to people about the most important things? I mean, think about our society now. We cannot talk about politics and religion, the two most important things that we should be discussing, and moral issues. These are the things that we should be discussing. And what we have found is that tactics paired with thinking well about these categories positions us as best we can to have the most productive conversations. Does that mean every one of our conversations is great? No. Just like I was telling you last week when I was talking to that guy who claimed that the Jewish people were polytheists, from the beginning. I had a 2.5 hour conversation with him. I was telling David, I should have ended it 10 minutes into it. Like, I could tell this was a level 1 person. I could tell he wasn't interested in the evidence right from the beginning. And yet I'm prideful and, arrogant. And I just kept persisting the conversation. He was getting frustrated. I was getting frustrated. I should have ended it 30 times. It ended up fine. But it was just, all of us fail at this all the time. Like, I could just give him one more argument that's going to convince him. No, he told me who he was at the beginning. And I just have to have, the discipline, so to speak, to let the conversation die its natural death, or to try to push exact. I mean, one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about evidence. This was a level 1 person. I never shared the gospel with them. I mean, for us, one of the things that we always say with our LDS, we have to show the LDS that the biblical Jesus is better before they even care whether or not it's true. Now, that's hard for me as an apologist, because I think it's all about truth, truth, truth. I have to show, because of all the things that are going to be involved with if they were to walk away, I have to show them the biblical Jesus is better. There's a great book by a guy named Micah Wilder, who was a Mormon missionary in Florida, where these missionaries were, and he challenged a pastor, with the truth claims of the LDS Church, and the pastor just challenged him a lot of what we talked about, and just challenged him to read the Gospel of John over and over and over, and really New Testament. He just read it over and over and over, and he came away with just this idea that Jesus is enough. That's like the tagline of their ministry now. So he got saved. His mom was a professor at BYU. She got saved. Her name's Lynn Wilder. She wrote a great book called Unveiling Grace. His book is called Passport to Heaven. But they were just willing, they were open to change. They moved from, and it was people just asking them good questions and challenging them with the appropriate level of questions, not trying to, beat against them with certain things that we're all prone to do, especially as apologists. And so I had to realize I didn't do a good job in the conversation last week, because I wanted to share them that Jesus is better, because they weren't necessarily caring about the information. And this is where the categories and the tactics together, I think, are super helpful. So I don't know, other thoughts or comments? Or nailed it all completely?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was good.
So, all right, well, there you go. All right, so what we'll do now is we'll take a break. We'll hang out if you have questions about any of the stuff that we talked about. Again, these first 3 sessions are more about philosophy of how we have conversations. This is kind of, hopefully you see, so we're going to go into the apologetics information in the afternoon, but I hope you understand that we're not just, shouting information at people. Like, we want to give you good reasons to believe that God exists, and evidence for the resurrection, and how we can trust the Bible, and we want to talk about those things. But in the midst of the conversation, in the midst of our philosophy of evangelism that we just talked about, which is we're always talking about truth. We're always talking we're asking questions more so than we're lecturing. So even if we're asking lots of questions, and if someone said, well, is there any evidence that for God's existence? Is there any evidence for the resurrection? We're like, well, I'm glad you asked. And then we can share some, or have you considered, right? The third tactics question, have you considered, and we give some arguments for God's existence. But at the same time, remember, this goes back to the first session, that these are people to be loved. Right? These are not just brains on sticks. And so all of our information we want to share with you, we have to find out where they are. This is where the categories are so helpful, because if we find out where people are, then that can help us know the kinds of conversations that are appropriate for them. And hopefully these can be better conversations, and that you'll be more excited afterwards, because if you have a good conversation, it only takes one good. It's kind of like if anyone plays golf. You could go around and play terrible for 17 holes, but you have one nice drive and hit it up on the green and you do 2 putt. You're like, I'm the best golfer alive. I'm doing this all the time, right? So getting a good evangelistic conversation can be so encouraging to you, and so we hope that this material will best position you. We think it will best position you to have those good evangelistic conversations. So, all right, with that, we have information if you are interested about. I think this will be back there on the table. If there's places to eat around here, all kinds of good choices for lunch. And the plan is that we'll be back here at 1:30 to start. To start the second session. So, I don't know, any other last comments?
No, I'll just pray for us as we go to lunch. Father, thank you so much for all your blessings upon us and just the conversations that you have ready for us. And just pray that we would have instill in us the courage and the boldness to have those conversations and to not be afraid, because that fear is not from you. And so we just thank you for this day, this time together, and pray that we would just glorify you with our actions and words as we try to share the truth about you. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And so one thing we are going to challenge you on is when you go to lunch, waiter, table mate, whoever, like people that you're around, is to try to get into a conversation, and that just asking questions. Try to get into a conversation. Ask them what they believe, whatever it is, while you're at lunch, right? Take some of the things we just talked about. The best way to learn it is by putting it into practice. So try at lunch to get into some kind of conversation, and then we can all come back at 1:30, and we can see how they all went, and we can talk about them, and then we'll study some more things. So we'll see y'all in a little bit.